welcome to the Munro Mumble. I'm Dave Wiseman, and today I'm sitting down with someone very special, Neville Wiseman, aka Normal Neville, aka my dad, to talk about a lifetime of adventures climbing Scotland's Munros. Since the 1970s, he's trekked thousands of miles, tackled hundreds of peaks, and gathered a collection of stories, statistics, and soggy socks that we are going to unpack together.
Making it sound very exciting. I can't wait to hear it.
Exciting. Okay. I'm excited.
There you go.
So let's start simple. When did you get the bug for hillwalking, and what even is a Munro?
Well, hello everybody. That's actually two very big questions which could take a long time to answer. But the brief answer is that I started going to the Lake District with my father when I was age 4. VE Day, I remember quite prominently running in races in the Duddon Valley. So I went to the Duddon Valley for about 10 years. And when I was 16, I started running a scout group. And I used to take kids, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, up to the lakes. And I remember one occasion giving 11-year-olds a tot of whisky on top of Coniston Old Man because there was a gale and some of them were getting a little bit upset. I also remember sleeves being ripped off the old cycle capes, again in the gale, and forming a chain to avoid people being blown away.
To get a tot of whiskey is legal nowadays, is it? In Scouts.
It's nice though. Anyway, good. I didn't answer your second question, which is what is a Munro?
We're moving on.
Well, most people probably know, but a Munro is a mountain in Scotland over 3,000 feet. And that's the beginning and the end of the description, really.
Okay.
But they were called Munros because it was a guy called Sir Hugh Munro, who in the 1890s, he used to traipse around Scotland, sometimes on horseback, but never by motor car because there weren't any. His time off and holidays, he chased round Scotland. At that time, it was thought by the mountaineers that there were about, because there weren't many, that there were about 30 mountains in Scotland over 3,000 feet. And when Munro came back and said, actually, mates, there's 500, they were astounded. But he had the judgment to decide that of the 500, 300 were real tops, and the other 200 were really subsidiary tops of the real tops. And I think those numbers, which have now been taken over by the Scottish Mountaineering Club, who make minor adjustments, but even nowadays, there's still round about 280 Munros and 220 tops.
That's great. So just trying to find out what the real difference is between, like, say, a Munro, a Corbett, and a Graham actually are.
A Munro is a mountain in Scotland, as I've said, over 3,000 feet.
Yeah.
So what do they call the mountains below 3,000 feet? Well, the answer is that if it's 2,500 feet, but not 3,000 feet, it becomes a Corbett.
Yeah.
Named after a gentleman called Mr. Corbett, who first made the list. Going smaller still, if you go to a mountain that's 2,000 feet, but not 2,500 feet, then these become what are called Grahams. And they were listed by Mrs. Graham, along with collaboration from one or two other people.
Did Munro climb all the Munros?
Mr. Munro, unfortunately, he got within 3 of climbing them all, and then he died.
Okay.
On the other hand, Mr. Corbett, he did climb all the Munros.
Right.
And oddly enough, he was an Englishman.
Right.
Making a list of Scottish mountains. I'm not sure quite what the Scots made of that. But,
I'm probably not too happy with that one.
Well, are they ever? Oh, sorry, delete that.
I see. So the Corbetts and Grahams are basically the Scottish junior leagues of the mountain world. Is that right?
You could say that, I suppose, in a height sense, maybe, but not necessarily in terms of difficulty. In fact, sometimes, not always, the Corbetts and Grahams can be a little bit trickier than you're expecting. This is probably because they are less trekked, so the trails are less well marked, they're more remote, and sometimes there isn't a route at all. Whereas on the Munro, nowadays especially, the routes are very, very, very well worn. A lot of them are paved even. But with the others, the Corbetts and the Grahams, you've often got to pick your way through deep heather, bog, juniper bushes, and so on. And you've got to rely on the map and hope that it's not lying to you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So the short ones can still give you a bit of a like a proper workout then.
Absolutely. Some of my toughest days out have been on hills that don't even make the Munro list. and barely the Graham list.
Right. So you mentioned that maps back there. You're still an old school map in compass person, or have you finally sort of caught up with all the fancy GPS gadgets?
Well, let's just say that technology and I aren't on the same page normally. I trust technology about as far as I can throw my rucksack. And I do think that anybody leading or even just walking on their own in the hills should know how to read a map and use a compass properly. You can't always rely on your phone or your sat-nav because batteries die, the screens fog up, you get no signal, your fingers are too cold or too wet to swipe, and probably a dozen other reasons. And of course the weather can change very fast, faster than how you can say, where's the summit? And suddenly you can't see more than a few feet ahead. So for me, it's back to basics every time. Map, compass, and a bit of common sense. Okay, by all means take the sat-nav and the modern gadgets, but don't rely on them 100%.
There's no voice navigation basically saying in 300 metres turn left at the large rock then?
Well, if there is, I don't really want to hear it.
So have you got any other advice for the new Munro Bagger?
Well, I think personally it's a good idea to start by going out with somebody who's been up a couple of Munros beforehand. So if you can find a companion who knows the way around and can show you the niceties of Munro walking, it's not many, you make it up as you go along really, but quite often getting started on the day is one of the hardest parts, because you always start from the bottom, and at the bottom there's often a farmyard or some fields or some walls. So by all means read the guidebooks. If you get to a farm and you're not sure of your way through it, knock on the door and ask permission, but avoid climbing walls and gates.
I can just picture people listening to this thinking, I just see the mountain and I just walk straight up it.
Well, that's very good if you can do that, but quite often that's not the best option.
I think one of your colleagues, Ian, I think I remember rightly saying he actually had the wrong map at some point and walked up the wrong mountain. Is that?
We did one day. We followed Ian, who was leading, and we went round a whole group of mountains, only to discover when we got down that we hadn't done the group of mountains that we thought we'd done.
Right, so we're moving on to the walking kit, because obviously things have changed a lot, and with all the breathable kind of anoraks or whatever you want to call it, anoraks. Cracky, I'm going back in the day now. I'm being a bit retro, but all the old sort of like walking material. What do you actually walk with now? And when are you?
Well, actually, talking about anoraks, you just reminded me that a long time ago I used to be a really avid train spotter.
Oh, let's not go there.
And the name for a train spotter was an anorak. And
oh, is that right?
I used to bear that name proudly. But there you go. Yeah. As far as walking kit is concerned, you're right. Well, firstly, I would say there's not as big a difference as you would think. I mean, more stuff is lightweight and more stuff is better quality. So lightweight boots has been a big thing, because you don't realise when you're wearing boots that they're quite heavyweight and you're carrying them around all day, and they actually do sap energy. So if you can get away with light boots, that's good. Yeah. Gore-Tex came in, made things a bit more waterproof, although a friend Malcolm worked for a company that bought Gore-Tex, and I have some amazing pictures of him wearing 3 more levels on top of his Gore-Tex to keep him dry. But you still need to take an important factor. If there's snow and ice about, you really, really do need to think about investing in crampons and an ice axe. For a year or two, we managed without, and we nearly came a cropper on several occasions.
Yeah, I'm sure. Just going back to the lightweight boots, some of these lightweight boots don't seem to fit crampons on particularly well, so it's always worth getting that checked out, isn't it, by whoever you buy the boot from?
Yeah, absolutely. I would, well, personally, if I buy boots, I take thick socks to wear when I'm trying them on, and it would be a good idea also to take your crampons along and to say to the guys, look, I like your boots, but if my crampons don't fit, I don't want them. You fit them on.
How did the Munro journey all begin for you?
Well, for me, it was coincidental, really. My local scout group, where I had been a leader, in 1976, they were short of a driver for the minibus because the senior scouts were going on summer camp on Skye. When I heard a whisper of this, I immediately volunteered my services as a minibus driver, which I'd never done before, and started off to Scotland. And it was then, driving through Scotland in the early hours of the morning, that I first really, really realised what an unbelievable place it was.
When did you decide to think, right, this is for me, I want to just complete them all?
Well, after 3 consecutive years visiting Scotland as a minibus driver, I could see that there was a future here. So I asked 2 of my ex-scouts if they would like to accompany me on a round of the Munros. They'd only just been, they'd been invented for quite a while, but they'd just become the in thing. And I'd never heard of them till about 1980. And it did sound like a really serious and challenging thing to do, really. So up for a bit of fun, off we went.
And you never looked back?
Well, I wouldn't say that.
That's incredible. How far did you walk in total?
Well, I was an accountant, so
here we go.
Fortunately for your question, I do know some of the answers to mileages and distances, and that's the same thing, of course. So I think we did just short of 2,000 miles and climbed about 600,000 feet, and that took us 151 days separate climbing in Scotland over a period of 8 years. We started in 1980 and finished 1988.
Wow. And sort of, any more stats, like on an average day?
Well, at the risk of being boring, an average day was about 12 miles and about 4,000 foot of actual climbing. We were fit, but we weren't super fit. We weren't these people that run round 8 mountains, 10 mountains in a day. We were just ordinary working people who'd shot up in a car. And when you shoot up to Scotland in the car and you travel 400 or 500 miles there and back, whatever the weather, you go out and you do something. So we never actually experienced a single day on the Munros when we didn't finish with at least one new Munro. We used to stay in hotels. Sorry.
No, hey, hang on a minute. That's not what you told Mum.
No. No, sorry, I'll change that, yes. Yeah. Hotels with an S in, which makes them into hostels.
Oh, yes.
And the hostels are actually, joking apart, much preferable to hotels and preferable to B&Bs because they offered good showers and a good drying room, and of course they were cheap. You've only got to stay in a bed and breakfast with 3 wet climbers with all the wet gear sharing a room with 1 radiator and 1 hook behind the door to know that the B&Bs are not necessarily the best option.
That makes sense.
Especially the ones that have fancy carpets that are all white and immaculate, and you take your boots off, but that still doesn't stop you dripping mud and sweat on your way to your room.
Delightful. What about some more of the memorable moments of your journeys? Have you got any sort of juicy stories?
Well, lots of minor stories like being in whiteouts and that sort of stuff. Yeah. But the only real incident or accident we had throughout, we were very lucky, is an incident on the Skye Ridge. A climbing partner of mine, a gentleman who went rock climbing, decided that he would take me along the whole of the Skye Ridge. It's something I wanted to do, but not being a rock climber, it's something that I could never do. Anyway, he kitted me up and off we went. And at the end of day one, because we intended sleeping out at night, somewhere about halfway along the ridge, the end of day one, we came to what is called the Theolach Doob Gap on Skye. It's a notch in the ridge. And according to the books, all the book says is, if you're not a rock climber, don't go there. Anyway, I was with a rock climber, so I went there. I anchored him down to the rock. He went up climbing, sticking in these little pegs called pitons to fasten a rope to. But before long, he was obviously in trouble. And without much ado, he promptly jumped off. I said he jumped, he says he fell. But anyway, I ended up with him swinging nearly at my height over a precipice. And I knew he'd probably hurt himself because he'd fallen about 20, 30 feet. So I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I'm a heller's like okay. I've smashed my face in." Good, I thought. A, he's conscious, and B, he's not complaining of a broken back. So during the next half hour to an hour, I managed to manoeuvre him from dangling in the air back onto the little shelf on which we were poised, and then to decide how on earth we got out of this spot. I blew my whistle and all the usual things, but it was tea time and everybody on the Skye Ridge had already gone back to their pub, bar or wherever else. But cutting a long story short, having scrambled down a steep pitch and having managed to guide him down to follow me, I did eventually manage to get him to Broadford Hospital and back to the youth hostel. The youth hostel warden was most upset that we arrived at 11 o'clock when he just put the lights out, and he was quite reluctant to let us in the door. And when he did, I said to him, "We need a meal. We haven't eaten for 6-7 hours." So again, he was very upset. But I made a meal and a drink, and with the warden stood with his arms folded, watching us all the time, eventually we retired to bed. And after 2 or 3 days, my friend was fit enough to get us back onto the Skye Ridge.
Wow! So you managed to? Did you manage to complete the full Skye Ridge after that, or?
No. We opted for much easier sections of the ridge, and we even spent a day in the Whisky. What's it called there on Skye?
Distillery.
The distillery, yeah.
Right, so we've had a special request from a couple of your climbing mates, Malcolm and Ian. Can we do a jingle for that? Oh my word!
Oh, very neat.
I'll tell you what, it's not budget here. And basically, they just want you to explain your legendary camp cooking.
Well, that's easy. My cooking has never ever been legendary, that's for sure. But they're probably referring to the day I cooked a very special meal in a pan on a large car park. What really happened was that while we were away in Scotland, we each adopted a different role on a different occasion. So, for example, one of us would drive, another one would sort accommodation, and a third one would be the cook. One day it was my turn to be cook. So having been on the hills all day, we arrived down at the pub car park, and I decided that we should economise by doing our own cooking, our own meal on the car park before actually going into the pub. It was my turn to cook, so I got the primus stove going, I got a large pan and raided the supply box. I decided on a tin of white bait. White bait is like small fish with big black eyes, a tin of tomato soup and a tin of rice pudding. So I emptied the ingredients in turn into the solitary pan. That would save washing up. So I put in the white bait, and on top of that put the tomato soup, and on top of that the rice. So as it all heated up in the pan, the tomato soup slowly pushes through the rice, making beautiful red swirls. Very appetising to start with.
Yeah.
And then when the white bait, who are in the bottom of the pan, when they awake and they get too warm to stay at the bottom, they start to rise through the tomato soup and then through the rice. And you know the meal is ready when the little fish poke their heads through the rice and start to slowly revolve while fixing you with an accusing stare.
That's amazing. I don't think Jamie Oliver could have come up with such a...
Well, I am quite imaginative when it comes to cooking, yeah. So we had a 3-course meal, tomato soup, rice pudding, white bait. Only one pan was required and only one plate and one spoon per person. And basically, we'd had a 3-course meal, minimal washing up, taken 5 minutes, and that left us with much more time for the pub.
And go to the toilet.
If you wish.
Which you'd need to after that. Yeah, I understand.
I won't be cooking for you.
Oh, gutted. I understand you were swiftly banned from cooking after that trip and haven't been reinstated since.
Well, oddly enough, they never did allow me to cook again after that gourmet incident. I can only put it down to the fact that I'm obviously a hard act to follow.
Absolutely. Picky eaters, maybe. I do recall, now you mention that, actually, some suspicious lumps in my porridge as a child. So I don't know if you were doing the similar kind of thing there.
Well, the variety is the spice of life.
Yeah. Right, before we lose listeners to food trauma, what did you actually learn from all those hills?
Well, that's a tricky one, that. A little bit of adaptability, resilience perhaps, patience, because I'm never the most patient soul. But really, you just realise how small you are compared to the landscape and the world at large.
Yeah.
The sky itself becomes a whole new environment. But I have found that walking in the hills, it does reduce everyday stresses and worries, and there's no better place to be, really. What I do like is, I'm not very musical, but there are just snippets of music I like, and one of my favourite songs is a Scottish one, and it has a line in it, and it says, "The cares of tomorrow can wait till this day is done." And that's exactly how I feel when I'm on a mountain.
Were you ever lost on the hill?
Well, difficult to say lost. I mean, we've been many a time when we've not known exactly where we are.
Right, so you haven't been lost, but there's times where you didn't know where you were.
Well, yes, but I mean, I know I'm on a mountain in Scotland and not in Hyde Park Corner in London, so there's lost and there's lost. Yeah, we had a whiteout on Lochnagar once, and that was quite scary. A full-blown whiteout when you can't see your own feet, and if you hold your hand out, you can't see your fingers. That's scary. Wow. Many a time we'd be in thick cloud on the ridges, and if you're on a ridge, quite a lot of the ridges, they go up and down and up and down and up and down, and you're never really quite sure whether the third top is the Munro, or the fourth top is the Munro, or the fifth top is the Munro.
Yeah.
So all you can do is do the whole lot, and you know you've done it. And the other time when it's been tricky is when it goes dark and you're coming down a mountain and your torch goes out and you've got to faff around finding your spare torch, and then your spare torch starts to fail, and then you start to quail. But apart from that, no.
Do you have a favourite Munro or area?
Well, areas is easier than specific Munros, I think, because in all the areas, the Munros just run into each other, one after the other. So favourite areas will include, not necessarily in the right order, what was that thing that the two Ronnies said? All the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order. Yeah. So I would go for Skye, Glencoe, Torridon, Dundonald, and then probably Ullapool and Braemar, bringing two minor villages into it.
Okay, very good. And did you, when you obviously walked up the Munros, did you always reach the summit you intended? You mentioned the white out there. Did you ever have to turn back?
Well, I think I said earlier that we never had a day when we actually failed to reach a summit. But actually thinking about it, there was one day when we reached where the summit should be, but never found it, because it was deeply buried in snow, and visibility was so poor that we couldn't actually be sure. So although we did a parade round the bulge, we didn't know if it was the top or not. So the following year, we had to revisit the same mountain on a day when it was possible to identify without doubt that we were at the top. But having said that, on a couple of Grahams, I have been turned back twice. Once by a really ferocious snowstorm, and once by casual map reading. Admit it not.
You spent a lot of time out in the Scottish wilderness long before motorways and main roads made everything easier. What are the most unforgettable places you've been, and what made them stick with you?
Oh, it's tricky, isn't it, really? You're trying to cram, 30, 40, 50 years of Scottish mountain walking into a few little sentences. But I suppose one of the first great places we discovered was a private bunkhouse. We'd never stayed in a private bunkhouse. We'd always stayed in youth hostels. The first private bunkhouse was called Gerry's Hostel. It's about 10 miles from nowhere, midway between Achnashellach and Achnashellach. And if you don't know where they are, well, they're on the map. But they're great areas for remote Munros. So we stayed at Gerry's private bunkhouse. The difficulty was, we were used to youth hostels where you had to do a job. But did you do a job in a private bunkhouse? We thought probably not. So we sat warming ourselves by his big fire when Gerry came in carrying a small duster and made an attempt to dust round the fireplace and then to dust round the windows, all the time glaring at us. It became obvious that we should say something. Do we have to do a job? Of course you do, he said. I thought you'd never ask. He said, I've got some trees that have fallen down near the railway line, and they're about half a mile away, but I could do with them in my yard, so I can log them up. So that seemed quite an unusual task, but great. My friend said to me, that's a strange job for an accountant, and of course laughed. Gerry tagged on to that and he said, are you an accountant? I said, well, yes, when I'm at home. He said, oh, I'm in trouble with the tax office. I'm 3 years behind with my accounts. So I said, okay, the other two can go off and get the wood and I'll look at your accounts. Well, the logs are very big, and by the time they got the logs back to the hostel, I had virtually finished 3 years' financial accounts. It wasn't very difficult. I come from Blackpool, and Blackpool's famous for its incomplete records, which means it's great at dealing with people who haven't got a full record of everything they've taken and everything they've spent. In other words, just use your imagination and common sense. And I've got imagination. I'm not sure about the other, really. So yeah. The other thing about Gerry's was that there were notes all over. There was one note pinned to a big chair, and it said, "This is Gerry's seat. If it's not here, you can use it." Over the fireplace, there was a notice that said, "No smoking. If you smoke, please go outside, walk to the end of the drive, turn left, start walking, and do not turn round." Was it? The toilet was a little bit basic, and there was a notice in the toilet, and it said, "1 sheet per sheet." I never did know what that meant.
Fantastic. Gerry's Hostel in Achnashellach. There we have it. Anyone else you can think of at all on your travels?
Well, probably a good neighbour. In fact, one of Gerry's nearest neighbours. I'm saying nearest neighbours. It's all right. I am 80 something.
Nearest neighbour.
So I am something or other.
Nearest neighbour's neighbours.
Yeah. I thought I was doing very well so far. But anyway, there was a pub about 10 miles away from Gerry's that we used to go to, and occasionally we'd take Gerry with us. On one occasion, we said, "Are you coming to the pub?" He said, "I can't. I'm banned." Now, what do you have to do in Scotland to be banned from a pub?
That's true.
Anyway, we phoned up the pub, spoke to the landlady, and she agreed we could take Gerry. The landlady at the pub, we called her Bloody Beryl. Beryl because that was her name, and Bloody because that was her favourite word. So everything she said was bloody this and bloody that. So we got there, and, "Hello, are you okay, Beryl?" "No, I'm bloody not," she said. "Why not?" we said. "Well, we had 2 bloody southerners in for lunch. They asked for the menu, studied it for 20 minutes, came to the bar, and then they said, 'Have you any salmon sandwiches?' So I said, 'Can you see any bloody salmon sandwiches on the menu?' 'No,' they said. 'Well,' I said, 'if there ain't no bloody salmon sandwiches on the bloody menu, there ain't no bloody salmon sandwiches.' And then," said Beryl, "what do you think?" He said, "The snooty buggers, they just bloody walked out." On another occasion, Beryl said, "We've got a bloody big party of pensioners coming from bloody England on the next train." Her husband, quite a male gentleman, Hector, said, "Shall I light a fire in the lounge?" "Light a bloody fire in the bloody lounge? Not bloody likely," said Beryl. "We want them here, in the bloody bar, not in the bloody lounge." Ah. And then Hector went on to say, "We have a little problem in the morning. We have agreed to organise a coach trip for them. There are 15 of them, but the coach only holds 14. "That's not a bloody problem," said Beryl. "At least one of the buggers will be poorly in the morning." And that was the end of that conversation.
She seems like an absolute marvel.
Absolutely.
Have you ever camped rough? I mean, presumably there's no internet back then. You weren't booking rooms sort of like online. What actually happened? How did it work?
Well, usually Ian, one of the 3 of us, he was our accommodation manager. So whenever we got to a village where we were going to stay, Malcolm and I would find a pub, park the car, go to the bar, and Neil would disappear into the village looking for accommodation. It wasn't usually hotels, it was usually B&B. And of course, if there was a youth hostel or a bunkhouse, we would go for that. But quite often we did camp, especially when we were going into the remoter hill areas, like going down the Larrig Roo from Aviemore to Braemar, going into the Whitbread Wilderness. And then one year we entered the Ultimate Challenge Walk, which is a coast-to-coast walk that has to include 12 Munros. So we camped all the way across there. But having said that, sometimes if we arrived late in the evening and stayed in the pub too long and we'd still got no accommodation, then we just simply slept in the car. And occasionally, on a really hot day, under the car, if you could squeeze. One advantage of sleeping in the car was you got an early start.
I bet. So I'm sure I remember you saying to me once that you actually ended up sleeping in the chicken coop once.
Well, it might seem strange, but that's exactly correct, I'm afraid. Yeah. We booked a caravan near a place called Garve for a week. When we got there, the owners were out, but we found the caravan. It was filthy. There were chicken droppings everywhere. There was a hole in the roof, and it took us an hour, at least, to clean it up. So having cleaned it up and gone to the bar and come back, in the morning, Ian, who had booked it, was ready to tell the lady what he thought of her accommodation. But when the owner arrived, she was laughing her head off. "What are you boys up to? There's no way that's your home." She says, "Come round the back of the farmhouse," which we did, and there was a spanking brand new large 20-foot
Brilliant.
Caravan. Yeah. Because we got off to the wrong foot, she said, "We do actually have a holiday house we let out, and seeing as you got a bad start, you can have that for the same price. It's got log fires, all mod cons, etc." Poor old Ian was quite red in the face.
You could say yoke on his face.
Yeah. or no yoke.
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Well, I say moving on, but still on the same subject as eggs. Have you got any egg stories?
Egg stories. Who on earth would have an egg story? Having said that, I do remember one evening we came down off Benet, and I think it was getting dark, and there were two of us, and we were starving. Our rations were down to one hard-boiled egg each, but we decided to go to the pub and have a full-blown meal. Mentally, we chose our menus. We'd have steak and chips, then strawberries and cream, and then coffee with some kind of aperitif. We parked in the pub car park adjacent to a large wood, and before going into the pub we looked at our two forlorn hard-boiled eggs. Before going in then, we decided to have an egg throwing competition. We'd throw the eggs into the woods, and the egg which we thought went the furthest would win, and the loser would buy the first pint. Needless to say, I lost. We went into the pub and we had that pint and then another, and then on to our third. Then came the big moment. We were ready for our food. We were ready for the menu. Disaster. There was no chef that evening, no food that evening, just crisps. Somehow, that's not funny. It wasn't funny at the time. Some hours later, we left the pub. So the first thing we did was scour the woods for our eggs. But no luck.
Anything else? Any other stories?
Well, I suppose we're getting near the end now. There was a story. We're in a pub called the Ledgowan Hotel, which again is remote, and it's not far off Achnashellach, wherever they are. They've got some nice bunkhouse accommodation, only about 4 rooms, and each room only has one bed in it. So you get your private quarters. And even nowadays, in 2025 or whatever it is, even nowadays, it's only about £40 a night. I mean, other hostels you can still get for round about 20. But this one, it's worth the 40. It's brilliant. Yeah. We're in the pub, in the bar one night, when a minibus of Americans came swaggering in. One huge man took charge, marched up to the bar and said, rather arrogantly, "Barman, give all my friends a dram of your most expensive whisky." And the barman said, "Are you absolutely certain, sir?" "Of course I am, just do it, man." So the barman obliged. And about half an hour later, it came time for this particular party to leave. "I'll settle up now," said the American, pulling a wad of notes out of his pockets. "Very good, sir," said the barman. "That will be £5,140, please." "Don't be ridiculous," said the American. "I'm not paying that." "I'm sorry, sir," said the barman, "but our most expensive whisky is £514 a dram. So for 10 drams, that's £5,140. You ordered them in full view of over a dozen people and your coach driver. If you don't pay, then we'll take you to court." The American paid with bad grace and finished by saying, "It wasn't even good whisky." "I agree, sir," said the barman, "but you didn't ask for our best whisky. You just asked for our most expensive whisky, and that's what you got. If you had asked me for our best whisky, I would have given you one much more pleasant, and it would only have cost you about a tenth the price. Anyway, sir, thank you for your custom. Have a nice day."
Ouch. You mentioned Ullapool as one of your favourite areas in the past, and having sort of learned a little bit about Ullapool and its history, I learnt about the Klondykers, and I've heard stories about them sort of back in the day in the 70s and 80s. Obviously, you were climbing around that time. What was your experience of the Klondykers?
Well, it was a really amazing time. It was before all the restrictions were put on fishing, and you could only catch so many fish, and you could only catch so many from here and there, and all the fishing really changed. But in the 70s and 80s, Ullapool was the place to be for fishing. The Klondykers were the Russians who brought very large ships over, anchored them in the bay, and waited for the local fishermen to go out and catch mackerel or whatever they were catching, and to sell them to the Klondykers, who would gut them, bottle them, poach them, or whatever they did with them. But every day, about 20 or 30 little boats would come in, like little mini lifeboats, from the Klondykers to the shore, and the whole town would be full of Russians. We never saw a passport or heard anybody say, "Who are you?" or "What are you?" It was just accepted. And the Klondykers really made the town rock. And everywhere you went, there were people in the corner bartering and haggling. "Do you want this for so many mackerel? Do you want this for so many whatevers?" And it became a bartering town.
Yeah, it sounds like it all lit up whenever you've talked about it in the past, when you've just said basically it looks like it's just like a whole flea market, like right on the loch.
It was like Blackpool illuminations at sea.
So do you still feel the same pull towards the Scottish mountains? When you think about the Highlands now, I mean, bearing in mind you just completed a Graham only a few weeks ago near Tyndrum.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I spent so much time in the Highlands. It's such a beautiful place that just to be there, looking at the mountains, is better than not being there. Obviously, I want to go up them all again, but that's obviously become an impossibility. And if I can get up one repeat Munro now and again, or one extra Graham now and again, then I'm just happy to do that. But yeah, I intend to come here at least twice a year, as long as I'm allowed to do that.
That's great. Do you have any unfulfilled ambitions left that you'd like to do?
Well, I don't think I've got any unfulfilled ambitions that I'm ever likely to achieve, and I like to be a realist. So I'll just be quite happy to come up twice a year, return to the old favourite haunts, and look at some of the stuff that I've been up, and just see how far I can get up a new path or a new hill, and be happy and content.
You've always liked to end with a bit of poetry, and when I say this is the first podcast we've ever done, so let's end with a bit of poetry.
Oh, okay, right. So this is a podcast, is it?
This is the podcast.
Okay, I wonder what a podcast was.
I wonder what you were doing.
I'm not much wiser. No, anyway, there we go. Yeah. Well, I did at some point write over scribbling things down. I did write a poem, which was called Mountain Summit, and it was a poem which was thanks to all companions with whom I had ever shared a hilltop. So it's not a comic one, and it's not too serious, but it's just how I feel. And it goes: I too, like you, love a cairn with its view, where all I want to do is be, for I am the wind, and the wind is free. I am the wind. I do, as do you, love an eagle's wild, wide view, and the empty highlands' amazing grace, as I freeze myself in timeless space. Freeze myself. A few, including you, treat Summit Rock as if a pew. Awed, as silence and peace combine to embrace me, embrace me, embrace me, entwine, embrace me. I am the wind, I am the rock, I am the view. I am nothing, but I am content. Thank you.
It's very good, that. Did you write that?
What do you mean, did I write it?
Seems a bit cultured, that's all. Seems a bit.
I can still write.
It's amazing. That's very good. Very good. That's all, folks. Thanks for listening to the Munro Mumble, where the chat seems to have been mostly downhill. Whether you've climbed a Munro or never heard the word before today, I hope this chat gave you a taste of the wild beauty of Scotland's biggest mountains, and of a man who took every one of them in his stride.
Just go and get your boots on.
Cheers, guys. That's a wrap.
Bye. Thank you.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as we enjoyed making it, head over to www.scottishmunros.com for more content, funny stories, and plenty more to explore.